Good evening and welcome to the February 8th, 2022 regular meeting of the City of Arcata's Planning Commission. We hold this meeting as a webinar in response to local efforts to reduce the spread of the COVID-19 virus. If you wish to make a public comment during the meeting, there are two ways. While on your computer, if you wish to speak during the public portion comment of any item, click the raise your hand icon on the right-hand side of your screen. When the public comment period opens, you will be unmuted and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. If you're on your phone, you can also join the meeting by calling the number at the bottom of the screen and using the meeting ID. Press *9 to let the clerk know you wish to speak. When the public comment period opens, you will be unmuted and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. This meeting is now officially called to order. Director Loya, can we get a roll call, please?
Absolutely. Commissioner Barstow?
Here.
Commissioner Figueroa?
Here.
Commissioner Tagney?
Here.
Commissioner Davies?
Here.
Vice Chair Mayer?
Here.
And Chair Vasade Alcock.
I'm here.
And I'll note that Commissioner White is planning on joining us, but she's not here yet.
And at the staff's table, we have David Loya, Director of Community Development. And is there anyone else from staff that's here tonight?
Not at this moment.
Okay. So let's move to oral communication. This time is provided for people to address the commission or submit written communications on matters not on this evening's agenda. At the conclusion of all oral and written communications, the commission may respond to statements. Any request that requires commission actions will be set by the commission for a future agenda item or referred to staff. Is there a member of the public who would like to address the commission tonight?
If you're hoping to address the commission on a topic that is not on the agenda, feel free to raise your hand. Okay, we have one. Go ahead, Fred.
Hi, I'm Fred Johansson, and I have a question of the committee. And it has to do with the Village project as well as the Gateway project. Are you basing your traffic flow on the 2017 Central Arcata area-wide traffic study? And if you're not, what are the other traffic studies that are available to you? That's my question.
Okay, I think we can address that in the course of Planning Commission deliberations on the item.
Maybe Mr. Johansson could come back during the business item, because that's a good question. That is something that we will be addressing later on, if he could hang on.
Yeah, and I'll try and address that in my my staff report.
Yeah. Okay, so was that it? Should I move forward or is there someone else? Okay, so on to the consent calendar. The only item is our January 25th meeting. Do we need to pull that item or can we get a motion from a commissioner to approve?
I'll move to approve.
Okay, so we have a first from Commissioner Tagney. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Mayer, or Vice Chair Mayer. Can we get a roll call, please?
Yeah, Commissioner Barstow?
Aye.
Commissioner Figueroa?
Aye.
Commissioner Tagney?
Yes.
Commissioner Davies?
Aye.
Vice Chair Mayer?
Aye.
And Chair Vasade Alcock?
Aye. Okay, so we do not have a public hearing tonight per se, but we do have a business item that's fairly significant. This, the business item is the consideration of a draft gateway area plan. We will not be making any decisions or voting, so I'm not going to ask for any ex parte disclosures. And although it is just a business item, we will give members of the public a chance to comment. So before we open this to the public and begin commissioner deliberations, do we have any kind of a staff report, Director Loya?
Yeah, I do have a brief staff report just to orient the commission to the task tonight and to provide the expectation of the evening's events to the public and to the commission. Okay. Okay, I'm sorry, technical difficulty still. Commissioner White is trying to get in.
Maybe she can just call in.
She's here. She needs to change her screen name.
Oh.
Oh, here, I'll do it actually. Okay. Okay, off to the races. Okay, so before you tonight, Commission, is the sort of a subset or subsection of the Gateway Area Plan. Now, we reviewed this once before with the Planning Commission. We have the entire document, and there was some conversation about the specific plan. I'll acknowledge that Commissioner White has joined us, and we'll add that to the record. And the intent for that night was to allow the Planning Commission the opportunity to dig specifically into the policy document, the policies that are in there, and ensure that what we've got in there is hitting the mark for what the goals of the plan are, and to make recommendations if not at this point. We've been conducting a lot of public engagement, everything from walking tours to the event we held at the community center. We've been tabling at Farmers Market. We're having We'll Come to You meetings. Each of the committees is having an opportunity to review the document at the committee level. And all of these engagement opportunities have an opportunity for the public to provide input and comment on the project. One thing that has been highlighted to me recently, in fact, as recently as tonight, a person was commenting that the public may not really understand what is happening with all this engagement. What are we doing with all the conversations, the communications that we've been having? So before I get into the detail on the plan and allow the Planning Commission the opportunity to get into that discussion around, are we hitting the right, kind of policy level with this document, and do we have the right policies in place? I wanted to take one step back and say that what the intent is to use this policy document, which will ultimately become an element of the general plan, so policy level document, as the framework to start in on a more detailed discussion about the specific standards that'll be used to define what these buildings look like, the kind of uses, what will be required of the buildings, and to give the community a good sense for what the future of Arcata could look like in this area. In order to do that more detailed work, we have to have some certainty around the framework. And so over the course of this month and parts of next month, we'll be doing all of this public engagement I just described, collecting all of this information, and staff will then, at some point in March, is my hope, go back to the City Council and say, this is what we've been hearing. Here are the themes, these are the specific recommendations. All of this information is before you. We need to hone in on a couple of key areas. One key area that we need to hone in on is building height, because the next step with building height is getting into a design process with the community to ensure that we know that we're going to have high quality design and what those high quality designs are going to look like. Before we do that, we want to know, are these buildings 8 stories tall? Are they 6 stories tall? What is the maximum? And so sometime in March, the City Council is going to give us that first blush higher level framework for staff and the consultants to go in and start doing the more detailed zoning standards that would implement that framework. Now, that's not the last opportunity for the council to amend the document. The council may take a look at all of the public feedback that we've received to date and say, well, we want to focus in on a couple of key areas so that you can get moving forward with this framework, but we want to mull over how these other policies or how these other recommendations for change, move forward. And we'll take those up at a later date. And I fully anticipate that's what they will do with the public feedback that we've been getting thus far. sometime towards the end of the year, after we've gone through this year of engagement around not only the Gateway Area Plan, but the specific zoning that'll be coming out of the Gateway Area Plan that we'll be working on next, as well as the updates to the general plan that'll be coming forth. We'll be coming back to the council and the planning commission many times to get formal recommendations for how we hone in those documents to get to a final product that will be adopted sometime in late this year or early next year. So kind of a broad brush stroke on what are we doing with all this information? Because I think some people are thinking to themselves, well, I've provided this input. I haven't seen the document change yet. We can't do that. We can't go and change the document every time somebody makes a recommendation. We have to compile it all and then weigh that with the decision makers. So that's the process that's coming up next. Okay, so I did want to do sort of just a run through the materials that were in your packet. Now I said in the staff report that we can dig into any detail you want. If you want, I can bring up some other element, but I thought it would be important for us tonight to focus on the connection between land use, housing, land use designation, housing, and infrastructure. That's kind of a core consideration within there. Now, I will say that we can go into building height if the committee, or I'm sorry, if the commission wishes to. We can delve into that. We can talk about that. It's not going to be a very productive conversation at this point because we don't have the materials available to us today to get into those more detailed discussions, but we can certainly go there. What I'd like to focus on is the policy around those areas though, housing, land use, and infrastructure. So with that in mind, I just wanted to hone in on a couple of pieces. So here's the land use chapter. And I want to walk you through how this land use chapter works. We've got these 4 development districts, the Gateway Barrel District, the Gateway Hub, Gateway Corridor, and Gateway Neighborhood reflected in this map. Gateway Barrel District, Gateway Hub in blue, Gateway Corridor in orange, and the brown is the Transition Neighborhood District.
I don't see the
So
map.
each of these...
Yeah.
Could
Oh
you
my
share
gosh.
your map, please, so that we can all see it?
Zoom 101 here. Sorry about that. So these are the 4 designations: Gateway Barrel, Gateway Hub, Corridor, and Neighborhood, reflected by the map, the Gateway Barrel in the southern portion near Samoa, Gateway Hub in blue, Corridor in orange, and the brown represents the transitional Gateway Neighborhood. Each of these different districts, like all of the districts in the city of Arcata, have a different purpose, a different thing that we're driving for. There's a lot of overlap and similarity between these districts with slight variations to accommodate the potential that's within each of those districts or the the transitionary nature of them. So let's just dig into this in a little bit more detail. So with the Gateway Barrel District, these couple of critical pieces, the idea is that we're not going to create a whole new framework. Internal circulation is based primarily on bicycle and pedestrian modes of travel. The idea being that we develop a campus use that has minimal vehicle infrastructure. And then those land uses within them would be focused on mixed uses. So like the rest of the district, it'll be up to the developers to decide when it's time to put more retail or when it's time to focus more intently on housing. And we can go into the purpose for that, but that's sort of generally how all of the districts work. But we're anticipating within that mix of different land uses that it's going to be highly residential. There's going to be a heavy residential component there. The Gateway Hub, this blue area in the center, which incorporates the Creamery building and a large portion of the Creamery district. Within this Gateway Hub, again, vibrant, high-intensity mixed-use area, allowing for a broad range of residential, retail, office, personal service, restaurant, entertainment, light manufacturing, and other similar uses. Think of the Creamery district, just multiplied, more of it. Basically what you have going on now, but more of it. Gateway Corridor, again, that orange area along K and along Samoa, focuses more on design that allows for retail. So active, inviting, high intensity mixed use designation requiring pedestrian oriented ground floor design There's a different aesthetic you get from commercial buildings than from residential buildings. And the intent here is that, it will feel, if not actually be, commercial corridors. And then the upper floors have primarily residential uses. So that's sort of the drive between those districts. This gateway neighborhood allows for the lowest scale buildings, lower densities, and it's a transition from those higher density gateway core to the lower intensity residential uses, primarily residential low density uses just outside the district. So the way that this policy will translate into the zoning when we get to that point is that these designation descriptions will help us to identify what will be allowable, how we frame what's allowable, and what those standards will be in the form-based code. And so it's going to be important to understand these. I'm going to pause for a second, see if there are any questions.
No questions,
Okay,
but
quick
this
recap
does
here.
make it easier. I mean, it really does make it easier. Claire, does anybody Commissioner Mayer has a question.
Yes, when can we expect to see a draft of the gateway zoning code? I know on the schedule it said 2022-23, but it's very difficult to look at this in the level of detail I think we're being asked to look at it in without having that draft code before us.
Yeah, that's a good question. We have to get the framework in place first. And so to make sure that we're on target with these policies, and when the council gives us the go ahead with that, then we'll start working on gateway zoning code. We'll be able to bring that forward to the community for, to start review on that, and certainly to the Planning Commission as well. Okay, so from those land use descriptions.
I think Commissioner Tangney has a question too.
Okay. Is there another question? Okay. Well, jump in if you have a question. Okay, from those descriptions of the different zones, we then go into the vision, and this is similar across all of the different elements. And I just wanted to point out these couple of first sentences. It says, the gateway area plan envisions a mix of residential and non-residential uses, but does not mandate specific land uses on specific properties other than requiring residential uses. Instead, the plan expects a mix of land uses will evolve organically over time in response to changing market conditions, social demand, and development opportunities. So this is very different from the way that our current code is structured, where we have a land use table that says you can do this, you can't do that. This one requires a use permit. The intent here is to go through this visioning process as a community, identify the fact that we want to have a good, healthy mix of economic activities, retail opportunities, and living opportunities in this area, and then go with a light touch on the land uses and allow the market to develop those. This could even retain light manufacturing within a site. So generally speaking, our zoning codes say if you're going to have light manufacturing, it has to be excluded from housing. What we've seen, however, is that there's in this district light manufacturing, even some heavy manufacturing, pretty close and adjacent to residential uses. So we already have a test subject out there that shows us this is valid and viable plan. And it'll really be up to the building owners to ensure that they aren't doing something that's disadvantage to their own bottom line by creating incompatible uses. There will be uses that are not allowed, and we'll get to those in a little bit more detail in a moment, but there will be uses that aren't allowed that don't move forward the vision of this, this community vision. Things like, heavy industrial, they're just not compatible with this vision. So, relinquishing some of that authority for land use mixes to the private market similar to what we've already done in the Creamery District, requiring that we get or incentivizing that we get residential uses, and then providing a middle pathway for uses that don't meet those housing goals that aren't illegal uses. The next, I'm not going to go over the target land use mixes in detail because we could get lost in the detail here, but if you have questions about this, I'm happy to come back to it. In a sense, this is an estimation of how much residential versus economic activity we anticipate will occur. And we can tweak these numbers up and down. Right now, we've got a target dwelling units, and this is based in part on the elevations of buildings that we got proposed. So if the building elevations come down, we'll have to revisit this table and downgrade the targets here. But we can come back if there's interest and dig into this table in more detail. This is not regulatory. This is really just at a policy level. This is what we hope to see in this area. And if we're not meeting these targets, we either need to reevaluate our targets, or we need to reevaluate our regulatory framework to push us in the direction of those targets. The next section gets into the policies. So these policies are intended to establish an overall land use arrangement that promotes mixed use, multi-story buildings, with a clear emphasis on high density housing that is equitable, environmentally sustainable, compatible with the envisioned neighborhood character. I'm not going to read any of these specific policies, but I do want you to come back to any of these if you feel like we've missed something that doesn't accomplish the goals here. A couple of the key pieces are that we don't have a maximum residential density. We do have minimums that we would like to see, but we don't have a maximum. And the reason for that, eliminating the density maximums here, is because, again, there are going to be developments that come in and target different sectors of our market. And those different sectors of our market have different needs. And in order to ensure that the building types meet that market need without going through some sort of loophole, which is what we see developers doing now, then we should just relinquish that and allow them to bring to market the housing units that we need. The loopholes I'm talking about, for instance, are where a developer will come in and build a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom unit. And it's because of the maximum limit on units that they're basically creating 4 units within one, and then they're going to rent each one of those bedrooms to a student. So they're trying to target the student market. There's a need in the student market, and instead of coming in and building, they can only build up to 36 units per acre, so they build 36 units on an acre, and they make each of those 36 units a 4-bedroom, 4-bathroom unit. When you talk to these developers and you say, well, if you were allowed to go to a higher density, would you make these, smaller, maybe 1-bedroom or studios? And infallibly, invariably, they say, yeah, that's what I'm targeting. So it sort of like eliminates that interplay between our, our zoning and, meeting the market demand. The other one that I wanted to, point out is that, we do call out the form-based design standard here. And in fact, the land use program, the implementation measure, is to develop the gateway zoning code, which is what Vice Chair Mayer was asking about earlier. Last section I want to focus on in this element is the non-conforming uses, site conditions, and structures policy. This has gotten a lot of traction. There's a lot of confusion in the community about what happens with non-conforming uses. There's a lot of misinformation in the community about what types of uses would be considered non-conforming or illegal in the future. And so I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about this. Now, a non-conforming use is essentially a use that is not a legal use, not an allowed use in the zoning code that was in existence when the zoning code was adopted. And so let's say you have a burger shop and your burger shop has been there for decades, and the city comes in and rezones your property and says, no more burger shops on this property. You would be non-conforming. With a non-conforming use, you can continue those non-conforming uses indefinitely. There's no one who's going to tell you you have to come and shut your doors. There's no one who's going to come and tell you that you have to get out. non-conforming uses can continue indefinitely. If a non-conforming use is demolished, let's say there's a fire, you can rebuild your non-conforming use. Non-conforming uses can continue to maintain and upgrade their properties and continue to be viable businesses. There are likely to be very few uses in the district that are existing that are considered non-conforming. We're not likely to have sawmills, for example, as an allowable use. And so if you have a sawmill in the district, you would be considered non-conforming in the future code. I think most would agree that sawmills are generally incompatible with the vision that we're bringing forward here, the community's vision. And so what happens with that sawmill? Well, essentially they can continue to operate, and they as long as they operate on that site, they can continue. There are policies in here that say that we would work with them to relocate. And so we're interested in helping to further the vision by assisting the private market to further that vision and help them to relocate to somewhere else in Arcata. Many of the uses that I've heard people concerned about, for example, auto shops, other commercial uses, light manufacturing uses, that I've heard people concerned that this code would make illegal or non-conforming is just not true. In fact, if you read through the paragraphs that we just went through with the zoning or the land use designations, we talk about light manufacturing, we talk about retail, we talk about all of these different uses that are existing in the district. And so those uses would not be non-conforming, they would be conforming, they would be legal, allowable uses. And so, some of the concern I think is about, what's going to happen to my business is misplaced. So I'll just put in an ad real quick. If you're concerned about, is my business non-conforming or conforming in the future, give me a call, we'll talk about it. Again, these are uses that will be detailed in higher resolution in the zoning code. And so we can talk through what those uses are. And it's an important conversation for us to think about what those uses are now. I did want to highlight this one section though, because it says, and in some cases require non-conforming uses to relocate as specified in the zoning code. And I think that this has been misinterpreted and we need to refine this language. This would be one of the edits that's coming forward. The intent here is not that day one we'd come out and start working to relocate you, but instead that we would partner with you to relocate if you're interested in doing so. And so back to the sawmill. When the sawmill is operating, it's obviously going to be annoying to people who are living next door to it, immediately next door on the parcel adjacent to it. And so we're going to work with that sawmill in particular, if the person next door comes in day one and says, hey, I want to help build out this plan. We're going to work with that sawmill to help relocate them to somewhere else in the city of Arcata. We have an industrial zone in the north part of town off West End Road. It would be a perfect location for them to go. So this isn't intended to imply that we would require non-conforming uses to relocate immediately. This is intended to imply that we would be working with those businesses to relocate them. Okay, so land use obviously ties into housing. There's a high emphasis on housing in each of these different districts. I'm going to kind of zoom through this. There's a lot more highlight here, but I'm just going to zoom through high level. Again, reiterating that infill development meets our economic development needs and fulfills other general plan goals like preserving the green spaces around us. And this is where we get into the concept that there's no maximum residential density. Instead, we would be focused on how does that building footprint interact with the street. One way of thinking about this is, that we're in this plan more concerned with the built environment and the relationship to the human scale than we are with counting specific units, recognizing that if you take a certain space and you can find the outer limits of it with, bulk, mass, and, upper floor setbacks and so on and so forth, and then you give it a maximum height, if you have a 4-bedroom unit and you have 4 1-bedroom units, you're probably going to be housing about the same number of people. So it's a person per unit kind of person density kind of impact that we're talking about here. I talked about this, that we set minimum residential densities in this plan. The other thing I wanted to focus on is that we're actually going to drive certain policies through the incentive programs to encourage, mixed income neighborhoods, mixed tenure neighborhoods, make sure that there's owner occupancy options, promoting housing affordability, making sure that there's student housing built out, so on and so forth. So we're going to, through these policies that are implemented in here, the question could be raised, well, why are we saying this specifically? The reason we're saying this specifically, that we want to see mixed tenure, that's a goal of the plan, number one, and so it needs to be identified somewhere as a policy. And number two, we can then leverage that policy into a specific measure through the amenities program that projects that would get the streamlined permitting would be able to select from. And then we'll be able to say, okay, you're selecting mixed tenure. Good, that's what we want to see as a community. I'll also just touch base, not only do we want to support businesses that are either displaced by landowner decisions or businesses that aren't compatible with the neighborhood that we want to see relocate elsewhere in the city of Arcata. We also want to support the rehousing of people. And so there are many sites that have existing residential uses. And if those sites are developed, we would work with them using our grant funding to develop transition plans to help relocate them. We can talk about that more as needed. That's identified here as the resident relocation assistance. Okay, lastly, infrastructure. There's a lot of concern about, well, how are we going to build this infrastructure out? When is it going to happen? Who's going to pay for it? Lots of questions like this are coming up. I encourage people to look to the frequently asked questions. It's on our website. It addresses each one of those questions in detail. At a super high level, I will tell you that yes, we are going to need additional infrastructure. Specifically, we'll need new road systems. We'll need new water systems. We'll need wastewater systems. We'll need new park amenities. We'll need new trail amenities. All of those things are built into the plan. They're identified in here as well under mobility, streetscape, open space. But in this planning document, a lot of people look at this and they're asking those really detailed questions, and they are very, very good questions that we definitely need to answer before adopting and implementing this. But the level of detail in the policy document is to establish that this is our goal. We intend to accomplish this vision. This policy sets the framework for accomplishing this vision. And then there are other documents that are going to be supporting to help explain how that vision gets implemented. Zoning code is going to be an important piece to that. The mitigation monitoring and reporting program associated with the environmental work is going to be an important piece to that. All of the special studies that we do for that environmental work is going to be an important piece to that. And so when we're planning for utility infrastructure to accommodate the envisioned growth, not just in the Gateway area, but in the city as a whole, we're going to have, as we get into subsequent layers of detail around this planning effort, those questions will be addressed. And so if you have questions, I can kind of go over highlights of what those answers are. I don't have specific detail right now about how we would pay for that infrastructure. I can tell you some of the mechanisms that we might look to. And one of them, which I think is really important, is this one, the Enhanced Infrastructure Finance District. This is sort of like redevelopment light. So 30-second elevator speech on redevelopment. Redevelopment agencies were essentially funded on the basis that tax increment will grow over time, the tax dollar will grow over time as property values increase, and that if you project out that growth over a long period of time, a 30-year period, let's say, you will be able to secure millions of dollars in funding to do projects now. And so we would issue bonds now against later tax dollar revenue. An enhanced infrastructure financing district borrows that concept using future tax dollars as the leverage to pay for bonds that we would finance now that will help pay for some of this critical infrastructure that we need and do projects in the area and pay for relocation. And so this is a mechanism that we should look into. And I'd certainly like to hear feedback on that from the Planning Commission. Lastly, I'll just point out that, GA 11D recognized, and we actually wrote this before the Polytech was released as a thing. In fact, we need to change some names in here. But the idea is that, the university is going to grow. The university is a huge part of our economy. University is a huge driver for growth in our area. And we need to work with the university. They need to help partner with us on many of these infrastructure costs. And so that has been a question that many public members have wondered about. What's the university's role in this? And so we hope to, have the policy backing to be able to reach out to the university and say, hey, we need to, work together on these things. So I'll leave it at that. There's a lot of other, really interesting things we could dig into in here, but I've spoken enough. I'd like to, hear from the Planning Commission and maybe address any questions that you might have.
Thank you. Do we want to start with commissioners asking questions, or do we want to open this to the public and then end with the commissioners? Can I get some feedback on that? Commissioner Davies?
Well, I'm not sure if we are going to do commissioner questions, but I had a question regarding some of the public transportation components of the plan. So happy to wait if we're going to take public comment first.
Okay, so since it doesn't seem like
I like the idea of going to the public right now.
first. Okay, so let's open this up to the public, and we'll give everyone, do we have a lot of members of the public? I can't hear you.
We have about 29 attendees.
29, okay. So let's do 2 minutes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so please raise your hand if you'd like to speak on the item. And I guess just before I do turn it over, I just realized I didn't answer Fred's question initially. The long story short is that no, we're going to need to do more traffic studies to address the growth that's coming up. Okay. Go ahead, Corina, I'm sorry.
Hey everyone. I was just wondering, does anyone know how much bond debt the city is already carrying? And also, do we really need more traffic studies? I mean, we know what traffic looks like and what it's going to look like. And that's pretty much it.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And just again, so folks understand the process here. We'll go through all of the commenters, and then the Planning Commission can ask me to address the questions as they see fit. So I'll be taking notes on those. Go ahead, call in user 2, or 1 rather.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Yes, I had a question. It was about the number of units, and I heard you say that, I thought I heard you say it was 1 person per unit, so 3,500 new units equals 3,500 potential new residents in the Gateway area. I don't know if that's accurate or not, but then also I wanted to know, I know the plan really is emphasizing a car-free lifestyle. I kind of wanted to know what that looked like. How many parking spaces per unit or per person actually is what I'm more interested in, would the plan provide for? So how many people are they expecting to not own cars?
Okay. Is that all?
Yeah, that's all.
Okay. Go ahead, Dennis.
Hello, commissioners. My name is Dennis Halligan. I'm a resident of Arcata and have been for a long time, since 1976. I'm also a former member of the Wetlands and Creeks Committee, and I'm currently the chair of the Forest Management Committee. Although I am here as a private citizen because I I felt like I needed to talk as a private citizen. I recognize the need for the gateway given the project for the Arcata area. And although I do have some concerns regarding the potential for impacts on the management of timber in the community forest and small non-industrial timberland owners. I understand, the non-conforming use relocation thing that David was just talking about, which sounded good to me. However, the relocation of a sawmill such as the R&L sawmill down there would result in significant costs for the business, which the owner would not incur, but for the gateway plan implementation. And I was wondering, would the city help pay for those relocation costs, streamline permitting, or otherwise reduce or share the cost? Too much to bear for the sawmill itself. And the plan has an objective to provide for the retention or generation of jobs. And it would be a shame to see the sawmill close or, and lose those jobs, especially when they actually purchase logs from the Arcata Community Forest. And as you are probably aware, we have some pretty large diameter logs, which a lot of the local other sawmills up here, such as MRC, they do not take these large diameter logs. So as a consequence, we have to ship them all the way down to Cloverdale or Will, which results in higher transportation costs, greater greenhouse gas emissions, and things like that. So it would be nice to see that some mind paid for how we would end up managing the Arcata Community Forest. And
Dennis, Dennis, I'm sorry, that was 2 minutes.
Wow. It's amazing how quickly time. Okay, well, you guys get the gist.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Kurt.
Am I there?
Yeah.
Check.
Yep. Check.
Hi.
Check.
I want to address the. It seems to me the city has been given a Hail Mary, a life ring, so to speak, by guaranteed housing demand, and I feel like we're just going to squander it by building more development. The city is. Well, the city is broke 30 years ago. It is completely broke now. We probably owe 300 million or more in deferred infrastructure maintenance. The sewer alone is at least 150 million in just the pipes. We have 80-year-old pipes. We have a wastewater plant that's consistently out of spec. And what we can do as a city is encourage all our current residents to increase housing in our current footprint. This would increase tax revenue and give us at least a chance to survive the next 30 years. As it stands now, it doesn't seem like we will. The sewer is going to fall apart. We won't have water. Our gas bill, our gas lines are going to fail. I mean, I don't get it here. It seems like we're acting like a 20-year-old who got his first paycheck and went out and is going to go buy a brand new truck. We can't afford to buy a new development and maintain it. Like this new development is going to bring some revenue and it'll be great until it starts to fall apart and the city has to maintain it in 20 years. I don't think the city's going to make it for 20 years. Like, who's going to pay for the new wastewater treatment plant that we absolutely need? This to me is just crazy. if we were to instead include this new residence in the current footprint, increase density in our current footprint, we might survive. Well, I want to ask every commissioner, in 20 years, how do you see us surviving as a city
Kurt,
with this massive problems?
Kurt, that was 2 minutes. Thank you. Lee, go ahead, please.
Hi, maybe I'm not understanding the numbers correctly, but I looked at your housing element to understand how much Arcata is obligated to grow by under state law. And it shows that Arcata is responsible to grow by 610 units between 2019 and 2027. I understand this is a long-term plan, possibly 20-year plan, but according to your analysis of population growth, you show that the population will increase by 2,900 people in 20 years. If you're building 3,200 units, which accommodate 2 people per unit on average, you seem to be planning for 6,400 people. That's more than double the 2,900 you state in your housing element. In addition, I'm wondering about this screenshot of an Arcata Planning Commission meeting on November 10, 2020, I saw on Facebook page, which indicates another area of development in our Greenbelt. It shows that 356 acres would be developed, accommodating another 2,500 units. It runs from Foster and Alliance up to the Pacific Union Elementary School and west into what looks like it includes the Sun Valley Bulb Farm. 2,500 units increases the population by another 5,000 people. Is this a plan for the future? My question is, does this plan serve the people of Arcata and protect the quality of life we enjoy? Your housing element states that you need to take that into account when you plan for development. People live in Arcata exactly because it's small, there's no traffic, it's quiet, it's clean. I agree it's important to be in compliance with state law and grow accordingly, but from what I see, anything more than that cannot be benefiting anyone but developers. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Lee. Go ahead, Carly.
Good evening. My name's Carlisle Douglas. I reside at 1588 J Street. Let me begin by saying that in general, I'm in favor of planned development in West Arcata, but I would really like to say to Planning Commission members tonight that to emphasize how important to Arcata's future it is that you all do your due diligence on this gateway plan this year and really understand the changes to procedures and codes that it contains. Please seek expert independent counsel outside of city staff to interpret the ramifications of passing the gateway plan. Second, I would like to ask all concerned citizens to take a moment to shift your attention away from building height and really focus in on the language of the gateway plan that provides for streamlining and fast tracking the approval of developers' proposals. This, in combination with a shift to form-based code, opens a path to a significant change in the character of Arcata. Third, I'd like for all of us to question the sense of urgency that is being promoted around approving this plan. The development would happen over the next 20 years, but a vote to deviate from our existing general plan is being pushed this year. While the state of California did devise a formula and mandate cities to grow, most California cities are finding they are unable to comply with unrealistic expectations. Why should Arcata be in the minority of cities who creatively figures out how to comply with a state mandate for growth that does not take into account our unique geography? And lastly, I'd like to plant the seed that we make a plan for our own city of Arcata to start buying land in West Arcata and create resident-owned housing on city-owned land. This model has been very successful in other cities across the country. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Carla. Go ahead, Jane.
This is Jane Woodward, and I would like to second everything that Carlisle Douglas said and add to it that when we're looking at the required additional units or population, not only do we need not to plan for a huge number within beyond what the state requires in a very short period of time. But we need to look at what HSU is doing when it comes to looking at what our infrastructure needs are going to be. They're going to be developing and putting 800 students or faculty, I don't know how it's allocated, on the Craftsman Mall. They're also going to be building and have plans to build additional residents on campus itself. I don't know what the numbers are at this stage. So when we're talking about how many more people we're going to be accommodating, how our infrastructure is going to have to accommodate, we need to look at what HSU is doing on campus and off campus on the buildings and land that they have acquired, and take that into account and balance that against what we feel we have to do to accommodate this additional number of people. But I'm very concerned about the infrastructure needs in terms of water, wastewater treatment, and how we are going to pay for all this. And are we expecting developers to come in and develop these properties? And is it going to be too pricey for them to do that, given all the infrastructure requirements that are going to go along with it? So I think infrastructure has to be taken into account in all these plans and what the requirements are going to be. Thank you. Good luck.
Thanks, Jane. Okay. Number one, go ahead.
Sorry, I had a little confusion. I'm typing in my name.
That's okay. You're number one.
So anyways, my name's Patricia Kamianica, and you've heard from me quite often. I'm really, really, really happy that to hear the community come out tonight. There's some great comments from them and concerns. I think they're spot on. The language in this draft plan is like extremely vague, unclear. There's conflicting statements. As far as the light industrial folks go, the rezoning of it is very confusing. What exactly, what are the illegal uses? I think there needs to be clarification of what's considered light industrial and what's considered light manufacturing. These businesses bring in revenue for the city, and if we just have a bunch of housing infill, where is our revenue going to come from? There's also like the language on helping and working with businesses to relocate. To what level? Is the city going to cover the full cost of a business to relocate if they're forced to do so? And then what exactly is, like, the community vision is thrown out a lot of, as far as like what's not going to be allowed by the community vision. Who exactly is the community? Because the community isn't really, voicing the same concerns or the same visions that are in this plan. So I think this draft left us with a lot of questions. What's actually driving the target quote unquote number of housing units? And do we really want to give so much decisions to the developers on how to decide what actually our city of Arcata needs, or should that be left to the people of Arcata? Anyways.
Thank you, Patricia.
Thank you.
Colin, go ahead.
Good evening, commissioners. This is Colin Fisk with CRTP, Coalition for Responsible Transportation Priorities. We have over 600 members and supporters, and as you know, we strongly support this gateway plan, along with many of our other local environmental organizations. I would like to point you to our comment letter that's dated December 13th, 2021. That goes into detail on a number of things, and those comments are all pretty much still relevant, since, as Director Loya pointed out, nothing has yet changed in the draft plan. So please check those out if you haven't already. I do want to address a couple of specific issues that I think are misconceptions. One is the idea that population follows housing, and so that somehow the city will build a bunch of housing and that will induce population growth. I don't think that there's any real evidence of that. And in our sort of market-driven system, in fact, housing follows population and usually lags quite a bit. Currently, if you look at prices, you'll see there's already an enormous demand for housing that's not being met. There's a lot of people who would like to live in Arcata who live in Eureka or McKinleyville and have to travel farther to get here for work or school. And I think, regardless of what happens in the future with population growth, there is already existing a very strong demand for housing that's not being met. Another issue is paying for infrastructure. There's been quite a bit of research on this, and actually the only kind of infrastructure, municipal infrastructure, that typically pays for itself for local governments is the kind that serves higher density urban type of forms, such as that being proposed here. So I think we can foresee that this will not be nearly as much of a drain on the city coffers as the existing development styles that we already have. And the final issue that I want to, I guess I'll save that for another time. All right.
Thank you, Colin. Go ahead, Sherry.
Hi, good evening. I have a really quick question. Can you express in units per acre, what is the density of the Sorrel Place building? And my question relates to the fact that I've seen really attractive courtyard style apartment buildings that are 2 or 3 stories tall and that surprisingly provide densities of 50 to 85 units per acre. And that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. If there's anybody else who wishes to speak tonight, please raise your hand. Okay, go ahead, Aaron.
Can you hear me?
We can, thank you.
Okay. Well, I know I'm not Nostradamus, but as a result of this plan, I see an ugly, dreary, loud, and dangerous city that will be lamented by everyone in this meeting at some point. And the current residents of Arcata will grow to resent this decision that City Hall is bringing forward. But this isn't really about current residents at all, is it? It seems like folks are so hopped up on the prospect of newcomers that they're done hearing from the contributors in this town that made it what it is today. In that way, the gap is antithetical to the Arcata General Plan 2020. Take, for example, the McBain Trust Project. They provided an attractive mixed-use building with solar and did a historic daylighting of Jolly Giant Creek. They used to be the good guys under the old plan. Now under the new paradigm in City Hall, they were given the finger with the Sorrel Place. Our neighborhood was given the finger with the Edge Connects data center, a principally permitted blight, one that so sneakingly didn't make it onto the Gateway Opportunity Zone map. All I see inside the prison fence is a huge parking lot, very few jobs, while taking up an entire city block. Maybe you guys should look into how that property can come into compliance with this controversial plan update. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Aaron. Tori, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, David. Can you hear me okay?
We can, thank you.
Great. Thank you, council members. I'm Tori Starr. I'm the president of Open Door Community Health Centers. I think most of you are familiar with our organization. We're the largest provider of primary care in both Humboldt and Del Norte County. I'm also a member of the North Coast Healthcare Leadership Group. And I wanted to just, number one, express, I think, appreciation for the hard work and effort that the city is putting into doing thoughtful planning and development around housing. And I think David and his staff have done an excellent job of getting stakeholder input and really being responsive to the community. What I wanted to share with you today, and it's remarkable that the second most important thing on my agenda as the leader of the healthcare organization is actually housing, because it's directly impacting our ability to recruit workforce. And so I've been a longtime resident of Arcata for over 40 years and dearly love Arcata and the residents. And I wanted you to know that there is really nothing more important than safe, affordable housing for our community. Without that, really nothing else works. So we have certainly seen the impact on those members of our community who are houseless. But I want you to also know that our workforce is being significantly impacted now. And as I said, our ability to recruit providers, physicians, nurse practitioners, nurses is now being impacted in this day because of the cost and the lack of affordable housing in our community. So I want you to really be thoughtful about that. And if we really want to be able to have a community that grows and thrives in the long term, we have to be able to provide safe, affordable housing for all of our residents, or else we won't be able to function well as a community. So I applaud the effort and appreciate all the work that's going into this.
All right, thank you. That was 2 minutes. Jim, go ahead.
Thanks, David. Just a couple comments, and it's concerning amenities and objective standards. And a couple things on amenities, which I may or may not understand correctly, but is it true that there's an amenity that if you build quicker on your project, it'll be considered a public amenity? Another one, which I think was discussed earlier, was building parking garages is considered an amenity. The builder will be able to charge for the parking, and then also that won't be considered a height. So therefore, possibly a 6-story building within a district could suddenly become a 7-story building, in which the parking is an additional, what I would assume to be an amenity more for the builder than necessarily for the actual community. Although it could be for the community, because in essence, it might force people not to park there. So it might work out in the end. And then ultimately on objective design standards, where I think are going to be really crucial in this project as far as it moves forward, because it's really going to be the only thing on the other end of planning where planning will have a moment to actually maybe dictate what the project's going to look like. And I'm wondering, when will those be developed? And will that be something that's open to the public to discuss, to actually allow this to be something that could be really productive and allow for structures that actually might reflect the ideas of the community? And that's about all I have to say tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jim. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, hello. Can you hear me fine there, David?
Yeah, you're coming in loud and clear.
Yeah, I don't have a lot. Not much of fancy words or any of that business. I'd like to think I'm more of an encouraging tone tonight, but I liked your presentation. It seems appropriate for this stage of the process. And I think the idea of phasing, that you suggested phasing some of the more concerning items for discussion, and get things kind of going and squaring away to where the public and the council see a reflection of all of the input that you've been receiving. It'd be nice to see that to start happening. I think that'll really help encourage people's trust and ability to understand all of how the process works. Anyway, I like watching the process go, and I look forward to seeing some of those changes coming back in concrete ways that we can see. And that's all I have. Thank you again, David, for all your hard work.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, call in user 2.
Hello, this is Nancy.
Hi, Nancy. Go ahead.
I'd like to express my support for a lot of the elements of your vision. And one thing I would like to see is, and I have a question about when and will there be the modeling that you'll be sharing with the public of the height of some of the buildings and their shade projections. That's one question. And also there's a lot of talk about what the developers will do or won't do. And could you shine some light on the info from the developers? How many developers are you dialoguing with? Less than 5, less than 10 in the area, out of the area? So, you know, if that's really kind of driving some of the design decisions here, that would be good to know. And also, I just was curious about the sawmills and where they're going to relocate in, you know, 15 years. At that point, are you allocating land, or will there be anywhere out of West End for them to move to? And one reason that that's a special interest of this area is Redwood is unique to this part of the country and you know, our county, and it can't be done in a lot of other places. So that's all my questions for tonight, and thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any other folks that wish to speak? I see one more hand, Chair, but it is someone who's spoken before. So before going on to another round, I wanted to check in with you if you wanted to open that up for another round from, you know, so everybody gets a second chance, or if you'd like to bring it back to the Planning Commission at this point.
I think we're ready to bring it back to the Planning Commission if everyone has spoken. So the public comment period is now closed, and it's time for commissioners' questions and comments. Who would like to start? Commissioner Davies?
Yes, I had a question specifically about the public transportation component of the plan. And I'm wondering specifically, how are we linking either increased usership of public transportation or increased facilities like buses or routes actually of public transportation with the expanded development in the Gateway project? Does it proceed with a metric on a building by building basis? Is it population based? Those kind of levels of specificity, I think, would be helpful as we address the shift away from parking to reduce the vehicle miles traveled, as the report calls out. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. We didn't cover the mobility section today, but that's certainly something we can bring back. But in the mobility section, you know, it does address some of these alternative modes of transportation. As was pointed out by some of the commenters tonight and is sort of embedded in all of the document, this really is designed to be a, you know, car-free neighborhood. That doesn't mean that there will be no cars in the neighborhood. That means that you can live there and work there without a car if you choose to. Currently, the standard for parking in the downtown and the central commercial is 1 space for every 3 units above 7 units. And so if you have 7 or fewer residential units on a property, you're not required to provide any parking at all. So that's a current policy that was implemented in the general plan and the zoning code 20 years ago. And then if you get above 7, for every 3 units, you have to have 1 space. So it de-emphasizes the you know, placement for parking. And that's about as far as our current code goes towards supporting alternative transportation. This plan has a number of measures to try and decarbonize, decar our society. For starters, I do fully anticipate that the the decision makers will ultimately adopt a less than 1-for-1 parking per unit standard. And the reason is because this, this was motivated by the desire to create jobs and housing, not to create parking spaces. The second thing is that going beyond just the standard, as we've done in our current zoning code, we have several programs that will be built out through the implementation of this project. One is a bus pass program. And so for projects of a certain size, or for projects that are less than that certain size threshold that want to take advantage of this program as an amenity, the units will come with bus passes. And so right now you rent a unit, and typically that unit comes with a parking space. In the future, envision a world where your unit comes with a bus pass. So that helps to fund and provide additional revenues to our busing systems so that they can become more efficient. Right now, we have kind of a chicken and an egg with the busing system in our community, where there's not enough demand to drive the headways that we would need to really satiate that demand. And so we get into this circular argument of not having enough busing. So through this program, we would actually be creating a funding mechanism to increase headways, to increase supply, so that at some point that supply becomes sufficient to generate a demand, that it's easier to jump on a bus than it is to get to your destination using some other form. In addition, there are provisions for car share programs. There are provisions for building out infrastructure for biking, and not just bike lanes. We're talking about a place to store your bike indoors when you get to that location, potentially showers at places of work. So if you ride your bike into work from Eureka and you get there and you're sweaty, you can take a shower before you sit down at your desk, for example. And so the plan goes several steps farther than just saying, we want to encourage people to not bring their cars. And so through future development, we're going to make it more and more difficult to find parking in our community. That's our current attitude. We're taking a step further than that and saying, how do we actually build out the underlying infrastructure, the support necessary to make having a car-free lifestyle a reality? So I hope I've kind of addressed, what the question was. Certainly ask for, find a resolution if I haven't quite hit on it yet.
Oh, that was very helpful. Thank you.
Commissioner White?
I was wondering what plans there are to integrate the unhoused community, for example, supportive housing, into the gateway plan.
Yeah, that's a good question. The other sort of central tenet of this plan is to provide a range of housing for the entire community. And so that goes from, our lowest income residents to our highest income residents, and to make sure that there's housing that accommodates all of them. We're working to try and develop pathways for not just having a mixed neighborhood. So you would have, a lower income building in the same neighborhood as a higher income building, but a mixed income building, so that you can't tell the income of the person who's walking out of the building just by the building that they're walking out of. And so there's no specific provision that says X number of units will be for permanent supportive housing, but we certainly would support those types of projects in the future, as we have in the past. And in addition, there will be a threshold, what's called inclusionary zoning requirement, for projects of a certain size, that they provide certain amounts of units for, certain percentage of unit for lower income folks. And the deeper you target, the fewer units you have to provide, is typically the way that these incentive programs work, so that we can really get into that deep targeting through the private market. In addition, there'll be an amenity associated with providing additional. So if you trigger, say 10% of your units have to be affordable based on the size of your project, and you say, I'm going to give you an additional 10% affordable housing, and that's going to be, say, up to moderate income, 120% area median income. So we're getting not only low income housing, but moderate income housing in the same project, as well as market rate housing. we can create pathways that will, drive the market towards, providing that full range.
So I'm wondering how that would work for supportive housing in a mixed income housing unit where they would be including wraparound services and that kind of thing. Would it work? I don't know.
I don't know either. What I can tell you as well is that state law requires that permanent supportive housing be permitted in the same fashion that any other similarly typed housing be approved. So if it's a multifamily zone or a mixed use zone, and a project came forward that proposed permanent supportive housing, it would have to go through the same process that any other mixed use project would go through. And so it's possible to have those permanent supportive housing buildings come in as well.
Any other questions? Commissioner Cagney?
Yes, thank you. David, I have a list here, and I'll just go through them, and you give as brief an answer as you need to on some of them.
Okay.
Residential home ownership, we all know what a big feature that is in developing kind of family finances over time. In the last decade or more that I've been on the commission, nearly every project that's gone through, large project, is rental based, including our most recent 4-story downtown project. And I sure hope that this ambitious development in Arcata would include a lot of options for home ownership. And I'm just wondering how we can influence that. I get that market forces are very real. However, if there is something that we can codify or on this, I would sure love to see that included, and even perhaps reigniting the first-time homebuyer stuff. So I'll leave it at that for first question, and then I'll continue.
Okay, yeah, real quick on that one. We definitely want to incentivize and prioritize mixed tenure. That's a policy that's in the document right now. And what that would look like in new development is basically condos that folks could come and buy the condo. What it'll look like in the broader market within Arcata, the hope is sort of what the theoretical model is that as we provide more and newer housing, high quality housing for folks that really ought to be in apartments type dwellings, but are currently in single family housing stock, renting that because that's all that's available, we'll start to see a shift over time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the market theory that we're operating under. Whether that actually happens will have to be proved out over time.
Okay, thank you. And then a question that's come up from public to me is about parks, where people are afraid of these tall buildings, lots of shade, and where's outdoor spaces. And if some of them house many families, where's the play area? It's not on a little balcony or something. It's got to be associated with these projects. So I'm imagining that in our code, there's ratios per family or per unit or something of where parks get developed, and that those will occur within the overall gateway zone. But I would like to hear briefly about that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I'll bring up another image from the document here. This time I'm actually going to share it. Okay, so this is figure 7, the conceptual open space plan in the plan right now. And it's got a range of different kinds of outdoor spaces planned for. The first that I'll point out is the linear park. So along, creeks, along rails, we can, improve the type and quality of outdoor amenities and spaces here. And you can see a couple of those where there are opportunities for that. So this would be outdoor, kind of recreational space. There's also a large site on the Los Harbors project, and this, these figures, are right now they're in draft. They may be reconfigured, but basically there's a large wetland out here, and so laying over the trail plan as well as the open space plan, there's a lot of opportunity on some of these sites. Even though the city doesn't own a lot of this, the idea is that we would, through this community process, be identifying sites that have a high potential for this outdoor recreational space. When you zoom in on the Barrel District, there's a kind of a square, like a plaza, an open plaza space, similarly sized and similar to the downtown plaza that we've got planned for in here. And then everything within this red box basically has it's in what we call the private publicly accessible private open space. And so there would be parks associated with developments in this area that would be privately held, but open to the public that they can go and use. And then lastly, the design concept in particular for the Gateway corridor, but also these elements can be pulled into the Gateway hub, would include street setbacks that incorporate into the public right-of-way some private space. And so you wouldn't know as someone walking down the street that you were walking on private property. It would just look like a contiguous wide open sidewalk, and maybe there'd be benches here and there, little chessboards or whatever, that kind of thing. And you would just naturally, as you were walking through that area, assume that it was part of the public open space because of the design elements. And those would be accessible as well. So the city doesn't own a whole lot of land in this area. But the other thing I'll point out, and I'm not going to zip to the specific map, but I'll share this one with you. There's a ton of existing and proposed trails that go all through here. These existing and proposed trails get you to lots of nearby spaces, including, the marsh, the Arcata Sports Complex. All of these are within, approximately 5 to 10 minute walk from almost anywhere in the district. And so the idea is that we'd be leveraging existing park resources and then creating new privately held park resources within the district.
You're on mute.
You're muted.
You're
Still on mute, Dan.
mute, Dan.
How's that? Sorry.
I'm in good company.
Yeah, if HSU buys in the district, that we'll lose control over their footprint, like could be happening with the Craftsman's Mall property. So I just don't know how that plays out. And why don't I just throw out a couple more questions and then you can answer them in bulk. What sawmill are people talking about? Is it the one that's recently arrived on Samoa Boulevard over the last 4 or 5 years? Is the Sorrel building that was referred to the new project that's just south of the plaza? And then in the long run, what will be the review process for each project in the zone? Are we heading towards some kind of, I hear form-based code. Does that mean that it's ministerial as long as they fit the form-based code? Or does each project go back through the scrutiny like we experienced with the Danco project south of the plaza? And that's my questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, actually, we had a request by Vice Chair Mayer to bring back a more detailed explanation of how HSU and their purchasing power and our process, how those intersect. So we're planning on bringing back an agenda item on that, another business item to go into detail. But to your question about what happens if HSU purchases property, it's absolutely true that if the university develops it, then they don't go through our land use process. We're a referral agency and we tell them what we'd like to see happen, but they don't have to go through any kind of permitting process with us. And we do lose control of those sites in terms of land use. The sawmill is the one that you referred to on Samoa. It's R&L Lumber sawmill. And we've been in discussions with them. I'm not, going to go into detail about that, but they're aware of the plan, and I think that most folks, if they looked at the city of Arcata and they were going to build it from scratch, probably wouldn't design it the way that it's ended up being. We have a lot of legacy uses that evolved over time that were related to past industries, past practices, past land uses. And so really the work that we're doing right now is a revisioning, a reimagination of what this area should look like in the future, and that we would like to see it transition over time. The Sorrel Place project is the project off the plaza that I believe folks have been referring to. It's the one on between Jay and I on 7th. And the question about what does the process look like in the future is a great one. We've talked about this many times before. I didn't go into detail on it today. I kind of hit it high level, but the idea is that yes, we're going through a community design process right now. That we are talking about, what do we want the look and feel of the city to be? What kind of amenities do we want? We're doing this on a landscape level, on a master planning level, to try and identify on a regional plan what we want to see happen with our community. And then we're turning to the development community, who is not our enemy, they're our ally. The development community is the group that's actually going to build these things that we say we need. We turn to the development community and we say, this is what we'd like to see. Can you provide it to us? Now, some people have said, well, it's going to get too expensive. They're never going to be able to afford it. And it may be the case that, some of these plans, some of these provisions, some of the amenities, they may be too expensive. And part of this discussion is to engage with the development community, engage with the banking community. You may recall the study session we had on alignment, that we want to make sure that all of the sectors, including the government sector, the part that we can bring to the table, align to provide the kind of development that this community needs, that it says that it wants within those design parameters. So if we'll have a form-based code that will talk about what the developments look and feel like, we'll have an amenities process that will be similar to conditions of approval. They'll bring forward the types of off-site projects that we want to see in our community. And when a development comes forward that provides for us what we said we wanted in this plan, it will have a streamlined, principally permitted pathway for projects that can't meet those objectives. And so, let's say I'm a manufacturer, I build widgets and I employ 50 people, and I've got an expansion plan to build more widgets, and I'm going to increase my employment base to 100 people. Well, that's not principally permitted in the plan, but just like it would be right now, there's a planning process that widget maker can go through. They can come to us, go through a planning permit process. They would say, this is what I'm bringing to the community. It's not going to be housing because I can't think of a way to make, widgets and not bother the people who live above me. And then we would have a conversation as a community. Does this still fit within the gateway plan? Does it still fit within our vision? Are there certain conditions of approval that we need to put in place to ensure that widget manufacturer isn't impacting the adjacent land uses that we envision? And so there's still a pathway for projects that don't provide the housing that we're asking for. It's a standard process that's in place right now for those projects. And then just like every zoning district, I think we get really hung up on this. What uses are not going to be allowed? There are all these uses that aren't going to be allowed. You go to every zoning district, there are tens of uses that aren't allowed. And so it's the same in this district, is that we'll have uses that we've said as a community, these aren't compatible with this future district. And that's how they will be incorporated as existing non-conforming into this new code.
I have a few comments, and I'll do it down dead, and I'll just throw everything out there, and whatever you want to comment on is good. So I think I made myself clear. that I don't really like this project, and I'm so sorry. I know everybody works so hard on it, and it doesn't matter if I like it or not. But Arcata has always been so cutting edge and non-conforming and innovative, and I just feel like this is sort of common. It's like the exact same plan you see in so many other cities. I wish we had something a little more tailor-made to our area, but neither here nor there. So I did have some questions that are more significant. One is regarding the developers. You know, I'm curious, what if a developer, you know, purchased these properties? I mean, they're target lots, we know that, and they're privately owned. What if they submit a project that doesn't fit the criteria? You kind of touched on that just a minute ago, because that could happen. And then I'm also worried about, there aren't a lot of developers here who could afford to do this. We know one, and are we at all concerned about one business owning all of these properties in Arcata? That could, we don't have to change Arcata to, you know, Dancoville or something. Are we concerned about that at all? What would happen with that? And then the other question I had was regarding the range of housing. Different, you know, so not everybody wants to own their own house, but a lot of people would like to own their house. And then, so in the past, well, I'm just wondering, how is the city going to encourage home ownership, especially affordable? It seems like in the past that affordable housing was always, there were so many strings attached with affordable housing. Right now with our affordable housing program, it made it hard for the homeowners to build equity and take that equity with them and, you know, move up and then have that place open again. There's always so many strings attached. And it seems like people move into these affordable housing and they can't get out, and they can't build the equity because there are so many strings attached. And in fact, that's part of the bigger picture on all of California is, you know, people, older people like me aren't moving out of their large homes so that younger people can move in. It's part of the whole picture. So I don't know, what kind of ideas are you guys thinking to help, you know, people get in, be first-time home buyers, move into their home and then build that equity and maybe prosper? So those are my questions.
Yeah, those are great questions. You know, as to the project or the plan being tailor-made, I mean, this is the process we're going through right now, is to ensure that, you know, we've, you know, taken several years of public engagement, took what we heard, created a plan based on what we heard from this community, now reflecting that back to the community and getting a whole nother round of engagement. And we're gonna, you know, reflect that back to the decision makers, and they will ultimately tailor make this plan for our community based on that input. So I know that, you know, some folks, you know, everybody's coming at this from a different perspective. Some folks think, you know, 3-story buildings are too big. And, you know, there were a lot of questions asked by the public that we didn't you know, get back into, and I'm happy to address those if you're interested. But you know, part of the objectives that we have here is to, you know, meet, you know, not only our state housing goals, but, you know, our goals for our community as well. And I think a lot of the times, you know, we frame you know, the idea that we're, you know, building in the community, and that building is for someone who's not part of the community right now, and so therefore, you know, it's negatively impacting me, or not building in the community right now doesn't impact me because I've already got, you know, what I need to live, and so I'm not one of the members of that group, that cohort that's looking for something. So, you know, I just don't want to see things change. The reality is that you know, this does have immediate impacts on us as a community. One of my coworkers, City of Arcata employee, worked here for years. It's a good, solid job. You know, pay is, you know, is decent, and, you know, makes a living wage. Recently became homeless because of the housing situation in Arcata. The people who owned the rental she was in couldn't find a place for their daughter to live because of the state of the housing market, and so they asked my colleague to leave, and they you know, asked her to leave within 30 days, and she was homeless because she couldn't find another place, just like the person who they moved in couldn't find a place. So it's you know, the people who are teaching our kids, it's the cops who are patrolling our streets, you know, it's the nurses that are taking care of us, the, you know, county workers, the city workers. It is our community that we need this plan for. It's true that there's a lot more housing that could be built if the total maximum housing was built out, based on what's in the plan. But the reality is that we're not planning for all of that housing to be built out now. It's not to be built out, within even the 20-year planning period. It's just a theoretical maximum. So how does that relate to, to housing affordability? Well, it's a supply and demand equation. You're chair in the real estate market. You understand that, the prices for housing goes up when there are fewer houses on the market. Those become a hotter commodity. Forbes has recently identified our area as a white hot market for housing. Their words, white hot market. The houses, from what I'm hearing from our real estate professionals, that houses are selling now, within days of being listed for over asking price, significantly over asking price, for cash offers. And so what that means, what that translates into, is that the housing market currently as it stands, you're not affected by it as long as you don't step outside and need to get into that housing market personally, maybe. But if you do, and I encourage everyone to take this exercise, get a sense for what your house is worth. Assume that you have 5% of that as a down payment, that you're a new, community member that's looking for a home in Arcata, and then figure out how much your monthly housing costs would be as a result of that. I would guess that many of the people who are owners in Arcata right now, in particular, if you bought, 5-10 years ago, you wouldn't be able to afford your house right now. And so we are the community members. It's us. It's the type of people like us that we're talking about here. It's not necessarily some future, amorphous them. It's us. How we tie that to housing affordability is by producing enough supply so that that we can disrupt that market factor. Many of these people who are buying our houses are coming from out of the area. They're cashing out of their homes in San Francisco, LA, and moving here because they can telework, or moving here because they're close to retirement age and are deciding I'm just cashing out. The average home price, the median home price in California right now is $680,000. The median home price in Humboldt County right now is like $425, $450. And so you can imagine that someone leveraging $680,000 home to move into our $450,000 home market has significant more leverage than the community that would be serving us in these middle income, moderate income jobs. So the way that we add equity into our community, and building equity in your community is a good thing. It's a positive thing for those who choose to go that route, is by increasing the demand. Now, you mentioned the first-time homebuyer program. There are definitely some things we can do to restructure that, and we're looking at that. That's not really the purview of this plan, and I can talk to you about that offline if you're interested. But I think we've restructured our first-time homebuyer program so that it works right now in terms of those equity issues. The problem is that there's nothing on the market that meets our first-time homebuyer program ratios, because the housing market is quite hot. And so the housing costs are too high for anyone who qualifies for our program to also qualify for a loan to be able to purchase one of these. And so that's another signal that there's something really wrong with our housing market right now. Going back up to some of the other questions that you asked, what if the project doesn't meet the criteria? Yeah, absolutely. There's a pathway. The primary thing that this does is gives a principally permitted pathway for projects that that give high density housing. And so if you come in and you're not going to provide high density housing, you're going to provide jobs, let's say, and there's not going to be any housing associated with it, or you're going to provide some other service that's allowed for in that zone, but you don't want to do the housing component. Then you go through a permit process, use permit, to go before the commission and address the use that you wish to do, make your case for why it complies with the concept behind the Gateway Area Plan and provides for that vibrancy that we're looking for, those jobs that we're looking for. And then, it's the exact same process that we have right now for many of those uses. And then you had asked about oh, not everyone can develop this type of housing. So that's an important piece I want to come to. And I'm going to share my screen again. Citing that only certain developers would have the potential to build these out. So this is in the Gateway Plan. It's Table 7. Talks about the development types within the various districts and the base tier versus these community benefits tiers where you would have to provide amenities to get into these higher tiers. And I think we've been really focused as a community on how big these buildings could be and what the maximum building height could be. But I just want to draw everyone's attention to this next line, which is really, really important, is that we have a minimum building height. And so, right now I can tell you if developer A wanted to build an 8-story building tomorrow, they just would not be able to do it. There's not a crane large enough in Humboldt County to build an 8-story building. And so that's a significant cost. In fact, I think it's probably cost prohibitive, and I can get some information on that to share with you. But this is a maximum. This is a minimum in this district, and so someone can come in and build 3 stories. Right now, the maximum development height in the Gateway area is 4 stories. Housing is not allowed in the Gateway right now, but you can build a building that's 45 feet tall. And similarly in the downtown, the maximum building height is 4 stories, but the minimum building height is 2 to 3. So there's a range in there. When someone comes in, not everyone's going to have the capacity to build an 8-story building, but every developer in this community has the capacity to build a 4-story or a 3-story. There's no developer who doesn't have the technology, the skills, the ability, the know-how to build a 3-story building. So it's not going to become a monolithic, one size fits all, development zone owned all by one person. There's a lot of potential out there. I think those were all of your questions.
Yes, thank you. Does any other commissioner have any questions? Commissioner Mayer?
Hi, I think I may have as many comments as questions, probably more comments than questions. First, I'm excited by this plan's creation of an opportunity to fulfill Arcata's need for affordable and diverse housing in convenient locations. And I'm also excited at the idea that we're going to be doing it, if we do it, in a way that involves slightly different processes than what we're using now. I think that the car-free lifestyle is a lovely 21st century ideal, which will work for targeted groups of residents, but will depend very heavily on the cities and the region's ability to develop a usable, robust public transportation system. Beyond that, we're basically looking at students who can probably get to the university by foot or bicycle. And so I think it's important to recognize the extent to which many of these projects would actually be targeted toward students or staff or others closely tied to the university community. And so I'm looking at the ways in which the plan's policies indicate potential cooperation with the university as a partner. And I'm also looking at the potential for the university to act on its own, regardless of what the city of Arcata's standards, desires, and form-based codes might present. And so I think what I'm about to make here is a plea for any cooperation, for any joint planning with the university to be done openly and above board, transparently, and in a participatory manner. I think the overall vision of the plan is sound, but the university's plans that will affect our community must be responsive to our community. And it must be through a process that we all can see. The form-based, and I realize that there are policies in the draft plan that indicate that cooperation will happen. I'm just begging that it should be done in an open way, a way that right now is not how the university has been operating vis-a-vis the city of Arcata and its planning desires. I'm also looking at this idea of the form-based codes and the pick and choose model of development benefits and amenities. It's a sound concept. It's tried. It's been proven in many places, but the devils tend to be in the details. And until we see that zoning code and the design standards, it's really difficult to say a whole lot about what makes sense, except that I'm concerned that in many cases, the things that are considered to be community benefits, density, it is not really in itself a benefit at all. And the price that the community is being asked to pay to support these increased densities need to work to the entire community's benefits. Which, that goes extensively into the traffic and circulation systems, but today we're being asked to address the land use, housing, and infrastructure sections. I am very concerned that the potential for 7,000 more residents in 3,500 units will create a burden on the wastewater treatment plant before the city has really worked out how our wastewater system is going to benefit or at least not harm water quality in the area, as well as the extensive wetland system related to it. I know that we've got a plan to upgrade the sewage treatment plant, and I know that its costs have been mounting every time a new issue comes up. The EIFD idea is another one which I would hope, if the city is going to be going that direction, is done in a very open and transparent way. Who actually pays the cost of borrowing money? The debt will be held by the city as a whole. It is a concern, and also the timing of all these things. Arcata would need a much more robust, adequate public facilities requirement, that the facilities be in place prior to development approvals than we have at the moment. And that's something that would happen in the general plan, not necessarily here. But I am concerned about the timing of all of this, and the role of the actors, especially the university or major project developers who might be coming from Los Angeles and bringing their own cranes. I'm not sure that we can talk about all of this without talking about those those tiered levels of benefits and standards, the thing that really caught my attention here was the idea of an 8th floor luxury penthouse being considered a benefit to the community while it blocks our views. I think it's really important to carefully weigh what we consider benefits and what we consider amenities that must be offered in return, and we don't have that information yet. That's going to be in that zoning code and in the development standards, and I hope that we'll actually have a chance to debate those things publicly rather than to see them at the last minute when there's pressure to finally adopt the plan. And finally, I guess I am concerned at the idea of a ministerial approval for any project larger than any project we've seen in Arcata to date. No matter how carefully the development standards and the zoning code for a plan like this will be crafted, there's going to be an opportunity for developers of huge projects to do things that we hadn't anticipated. And by putting our hands out and offering a ministerial approval for such huge projects, we've closed the door on the ability of the community to continue to say, oh yeah, we hadn't thought of that. And we're stuck. We would be legally stuck. So I'd love to see what the draft zoning code associated with the Gateway plan will be. And I hope that the community can have some major input into what that's going to look like. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that we haven't heard from? No? Commissioner Figueroa?
Yeah, just I guess it's really quickly. I guess I'll just focus on the infrastructure policies because it's more my realm. In respects to, for instance, the low impact design issues that we have in regards of increasing density, increasing development within our community. This is a question that I asked when we were walking around, when we first visited this, and the first time I actually got to meet all you guys, how are we going to be handling low impact the low impact design in regards of this development? We state here in this policy chapter that we encourage and incentivize opportunities to incorporate LID, where in fact it's actually mandated via the State Water Resource Control Board's and PDS general permit for small municipal separate stormwater sewer systems. And with the increased, new net impervious services, we have a lot of stormwater that we have to treat. And if we can't treat it, because for instance, in the Gateway area, in the Barrel area, we have groundwater that's at 3 feet below ground surface, 4 feet below ground surface. How are we supposed to design infiltration basins, bioretention basins to handle stormwater from these developments, from the new parking lots, the new sidewalks, new roofs, so on and so forth? Alternatives are essentially, we have rainwater catchment vaults, essentially, which would store the water, but then would still need to be treated. So then it goes back to the other issue in respects to, our existing wastewater treatment facility. Could it actually handle the capacity to treat stormwater that comes from our roadways, that comes from our sidewalks, that comes from our roofs, can the added load, can this added load, actually be dealt with by our existing system? It's been a real big concern of mine the entire time, just because this is not just an incentivization or essentially an encouragement. It's a requirement by state law. So I'm just wondering, it's just, we really need to think about this sort of stuff. Just because it's, do we even really have a project if we can't treat stormwater? Treatment BMPs are a huge issue, in respects to new development, especially now with Clean California rules and so forth, they handle litter and, debris going into our waterways. So I just wanted to focus on that in regards of just one instance in this. And, it's going to be difficult to really get into the nitty gritty without understanding the zoning codes and, again, the development standards, how in which we're going to be handling these sorts of situations. And, do we have the monies, in regard to seeing, the attempt to be able to buy it now and pay for it later through, bond debt, is this actually, going to be feasible? And, do we need to start considering infrastructure improvements now before we start considering, this, incredible amount of growth? So that's about it for my comment. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just address that real quick, absolutely, we can refine this low impact design. I think the idea here was to encourage and incentivize low impact design that goes above and beyond what's required by the state. We don't right now have any projects that have stormwater intentionally plumbed into the sewer system. That's not the treatment requirement. And so all of those are treated on site, and in the future they'll continue to be treated on site. And absolutely the site specific details as to how that treatment happens is going to be left to the individual project to prove. And if they can't meet those standards, then they won't be able to develop. I guess the one thing to kind of counterpoint is that if you have a one-story building, you have the same amount of impervious surface as you have a four-story building, and so you're getting more development potential for more community use and activity, but you're still having the same impact on stormwater.
Any other questions? Dan, take.
Sorry, briefly, David, were there balloons flown last Saturday? And if so, was that, I heard that there were, and that they were supposed to indicate some building height. Was that a city thing? And the other question I have is, are there any communities in Northern California that have enacted similar development strategies that you've walked through or visited or can direct us to, Healdsburg or somewhere that probably has 5, 6, 7 stories near their downtown corridors in a similar kind of population base? I keep hearing, let's not make this into, and then somebody will throw something out in LA. And I can't relate to that. That's more than half the state lives in LA. But is there something in Northern California that you can touch on that is similar to this vision?
Yeah, there are plenty of examples, and maybe what I'll plan for a future planning commission meeting is sort of a virtual tour of some of these downtowns and some of the plans that we look to for inspiration for how to do this planning process.
I think the public would really like to see that too.
Yeah, and the balloon, I heard rumors of a balloon. It wasn't the city. I wish it was, because that's a killer idea. I love the fact that whoever did that did it, and I hope it's it's getting out there and being made public. It kind of relates to it's basically a story poll process. They must have done it on a windless day, because otherwise wouldn't necessarily be 8 stories. But it does sort of translate into, what the next steps are. I think one of the community members had asked about, how do we go through the next steps for design process, and what we'd like to do after we get this framework. We're hearing a lot. I mean, I'll just be perfectly blunt. We're hearing a lot from many different sectors. The majority of the different sectors, I would hazard a guess. I mean, we haven't tallied up the comments yet, but that people are concerned that 8 stories is too tall. And in particular, we're hearing from several architects that it's just too tall, and so maybe 8 stories is too tall. And so we'll be revising that downward. And through this framework, if we revise that downward, the council says, yeah, 8 stories is too tall. We want you to go to 6, let's say. Then our next steps will be to get into a little bit more resolution. We have our consultant has a GIS system that they can use to create, basically, blocks for massing to get a sense for, rough sense for what that massing would look like on the ground. And then it also will be able to use, shadow projections so that you can see what the shading would look like and that sort of thing. So that'll be one avenue that we explore with the community. And then the second, we haven't completely resolved on, but what the idea that was floated was to take some, SketchUp models that are relatively simple to put together, and then put those inside those, those block models, so that we can see, okay, within that framework, here's an actual development that we might see on the ground on this specific location, and then you'd be able to have kind of a virtual experience with it. And then another sort of layer of design detail that we'll go through with the community involves, selecting from sort of the template of designs that we see in the community that we want to, see replicated. If you go in the Creamery District, you'll see many of the new buildings borrow ideas, design ideas from the old buildings. And I think that's part of what gives it the cohesion that area has. So we'll be, taking that process as well. To ensure that we have, community input on those designs. So we don't end up with something that, looks like it could be in LA or any town USA. The intent is to make it rabidly Arcata.
All right. Any last, Commissioner Mayor?
Yeah, I wanted to ask also, I think since our last meeting, the notice of preparation has come out for this draft plan and the general plan amendments that would presumably be adopted around the same time, since the gateway plan is envisioned as an element of an amended general plan. And I'm wondering if you could say a few words about how the environmental impact assessment and cumulative effects analysis is going to work with not just the gateway plan element, but with the general plan as a whole. It's way early to envision what the EIR for this is going to look like, but I appreciate that the city wants to develop both the plan and the environmental impact analysis of its potential effects simultaneously. So I wonder if you can just say a few words about that, and also about what the Planning Commission's role might be in that EIR process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess in brief, the EIR will cover, all of the elements of the general plan update. We have General Plan 2020 that was planning process through the year 2020. We'll be updating that to, to accommodate the next 20-year plan, as well as, pulling in a couple of new elements. The Gateway Plan is one of the new elements, specific area. It's a community plan for this specific area that's identified, in addition to a couple other elements that'll address some health and equity policy and then climate adaptation policy. In addition, the zoning that's proposed for the Gateway Area Plan, and then some other upzoning that the Planning Commission has identified previously,
Okay, thank you. Is there anything else, Judith?
It's a little add-on to this. My understanding is that the California State University is not considering their plans to expand the university as a project subject to CEQA. Has there been any discussion with the CSU or with the university about addressing the potential for cumulative environmental impacts as a result of those expansion plans?
No, nothing, no formal discussions have initiated at this point. The plan, and again, I don't want to speak for the university, the plan is outlined in their prospectus, and the community should, go to the Polytech's webpage where they can review the prospectus and all the planning efforts. There are actually several working groups that are working on different elements of the Polytech rollout. Those are all listed. The chairs for each of those is listed on the Polytech website. So if folks are interested in what's going on in any particular area of the Polytech development, they can certainly reach out to the university. In terms of the policy that we have to work with the university and continue to collaborate, we absolutely do want to work in partnership to make sure that our projects address one another. And so while I'm not certain the decision that you've referred to about the Polytech deciding that the master planning is not subject to CEQA, each of the individual projects would be. And so if they come forward with a project within a time frame that overlaps with our planning process, obviously we would take that into consideration in the cumulative effects analysis. And absolutely, in terms of the growth, population growth, the city is considering the university's plans as kind of an add-on or a major driver in population growth. And when we get those models resolved, I'll certainly bring those to the Planning Commission. We can walk through those.
Okay, so if there's nothing else, I'd like to close this business item and move on to correspondence and communications. Do we have any correspondence or communications?
I think I'm all talked out.
All right, then this meeting is adjourned. Have a nice evening, everyone.
Thanks all.